Welcome to Life Rebounding, a ministry of encouragement and hope to help your life rebound in your walk with Jesus Christ. Thank you for joining me once again as we take these few moments to look at the scriptures and find encouragement and hope for our lives through them. And today we continue to look at the fragrance of Christmas as we prepare our hearts and lives for the Advent season and for the celebration of Christ's incarnation at Christmas. And in particular, we're looking at Genesis chapter 8 and Noah's building of an altar and the offering that he would make on it. And so as we look at it, we once again think about the fragrance of Christmas. Now, I mentioned before that I grew up in a home that was very sensory, especially around the Christmas season, where there would be all kinds of home baking and the sounds of friends and family and laughter would be gathered regularly in our home, a place of great joy and great enjoyment. But it was a time when you could smell the food, you could taste the food, you could hear the laughter and the joy, all very sensory. And that's carried through for the most part in my life. Our home is one of those homes on the street that everybody drives by to see the lights, the sensory experience of our display. And that's very much a part of our Christmas. But in terms of those sensory moments, we're reminded that God gives us sensory moments too that embed things in our memory that help us recall experiences that point us to Jesus Christ and draw us to him. And Genesis chapter 8 is one of those moments when Noah disembarks from the ark and he builds an altar, and then we're told that he makes an offering on that altar. And it's not just any offering, it's called a burnt offering. Now, burnt offerings have meaning. They're meant to arise, the offerings, or ascend to the Lord. And so what happens is the offerings are burned, whether it's animal or an object, they are burned, and the thought is that the smoke rising from the offering ascends into the nostrils of God, and the desire, obviously, is that it would be a pleasing fragrance to the Lord. And so as we see about this burnt offering, we recognize from the book of Leviticus that there are 5 different offerings that the book of Leviticus tells us about, all of which foreshadow the sacrifice of Christ and how he fulfilled them. In Exodus, the Israelites are learning what it is to be a free people, free from their bondage in Egypt. But in Leviticus, they're learning to be a worshiping community, where worship is taking on more formalized patterns. And so worship would be learned to be communal, not just every man or every person under their own tree. And so the various forms of sacrifice addressed various needs that the people of Israel would have had. And the New Testament makes clear that all the different sacrifices were represented in Christ and his sacrifice. And so what specifically is there about the burnt offering that we need to pay attention to? Well, the burnt offering occurred in 5 acts. In the first act, the person bringing the sacrifice would take cattle, a sheep, a member of the flock, or a bird, some domestic animal without blemish. Now that's significant because it emphasized both the costliness and the purity of the sacrifice, which point to Jesus once again. And the animal was brought to the entrance of the tabernacle. That's the end of the first act. In the second act, the worshiper laid their hand on the head of the animal, signifying that this animal represented them. That's the end of the second act. In the third act, the worshiper kills the animal in this prescribed way by the law of Moses. That's the end of the third act. In the fourth act, the priest sprinkles the blood widely, emphasizing the pervasive nature of sin. And then in Act 5, the priest lights the fire and burns the animal. And for the worshiper, it's an act that is personal, it's devotional, it's sacrificial because it costs them something, and it's free. It's not compulsory. It's something people had to choose to do, that they wanted to do, and so it was offered freely. And so the significance of this offering is that it flows from a heart that has a desire to do something that pleases God. And so it's personal. like the offering of our lives on the living altar of Jesus Christ as we offer our lives to him. It's costly. Our offering of our lives will always cost us something. It'll cost us the surrender of our agendas. It'll cost us the surrender of our performing and pleasing, our desire to show works and merits that we think will get us into heaven and reconcile us with God. That just doesn't work. It is costly in terms of the surrender of our ego and pride. And it is costly in terms of the surrender of our sin to turn away from it. In 2 Samuel 24, verse 24, as David was preparing to make a sacrifice in the bringing back of the altar, this is what he said, "I won't sacrifice what cost me nothing." And so Christ opens the altar through his costly sacrifice for us. He's both the altar and the sacrifice, the burnt offering for us. But let's recognize one other thing about this burnt offering. It's communal. Christ draws us together in community. It's not just every person under their own tree. It's not every person on their own golf course. It's not every person at their own fishing hole. It's not every person in their own garden. It's not every person in front of their own TV or on the internet. It is communal. That's the way worship is intended to be. It's where I bring my ember to the altar as you bring your ember to the altar. And together we join our embers to ignite the flame of worship before the Lord, to honor him and to give our expression of our gratitude to him. And so Noah's burnt offering points us to Jesus. As Paul says, "But thanks be to God who always leads us as captives in Christ's triumphal procession and uses us to spread the aroma or the fragrance of the knowledge of him." Isn't it interesting that at Jesus' birth, the Magi brought frankincense and myrrh to the altar of Jesus? That's part of the fragrance that is offered to Jesus Christ as part of the worship sacrifice. And we'll talk about this more in the next time. But as we prepare our hearts for Advent and for the celebration of Christmas, the incarnation of Christ, may our lives be fragrant for Jesus. May others smell Jesus in our lives and be drawn to the beautiful fragrance of who he is through his love demonstrated at the cross of Calvary.